introductions, just a little bit about all of us. I'll go ahead and start. I'm Justin Cope. I got hired here at Disability in Action 4 months ago, and um, it's been a pretty good experience to work here for these 4 months, and I hope that uh, we can continue to get some good information out there for those that are seeking it in the state of Texas. Um, that's all I've got for my introduction.
I'm Y.S. Sincere. I've been at DIA 5 years in November. I'm a case manager.
My name's Joanne Fluke, and I'm a independent living service program specialist, and I've been here for 3 years as of the 1st of August. So, yeah.
And I'm Diana Mendoza. I'm one of the caseworkers here, and I've been here 5 months.
Your second time.
Exactly.
Okay.
Marsh.
What is happening?
You want me to go, Justin, or no?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry.
Okay. I'm Liz Marsh with Texas Workforce Commission Vocational Rehabilitation Program. We used to be called DARS, and before that TRC, so you may be familiar with us. I'm a counselor. I've been here for over 20 years, so I've been with all three of the different names that we have. And I'm glad there aren't a lot of people on here, because giving presentations isn't my most favorite thing to do, but I can answer hard questions. So I'll kind of give an overview, and I'm not sure how familiar with VR you guys already are. So I kind of have a general overview, and then I can answer any questions if anybody has any.
Okay.
Do you want me to go ahead and talk now, Justin, or?
Yes, ma'am. If you want.
Okay. Okay. So on our official website, the overview that TWC gives is we provide services for people with disabilities to help them prepare for, obtain, retain, or advance in employment. The eligibility criteria are you have a disability that causes some barriers to employment. Our services are required for you to prepare for, obtain, retain, or advance in employment, and that you're able to do so. You're expected to be able to go to work. The eligibility decision is made by counselors. So what happens when a person is interested in services, they fill out an application. Whatever counselor they fill out that application with is the person who will determine their eligibility for services. Our federal mandate is that there's 60 days to determine the eligibility. Sometimes it's real fast, sometimes it's closer to that 60 days, just kind of depends on the situation. Myself, I work with high school students. All of the high schools I work with get me school records really fast. So it usually takes me a week to determine eligibility for students. Whereas if somebody has to request medical records and they're from a specialist out of state, it may take a little bit longer to get those to use for the eligibility determination. On the website, the general services that TWC lists that we may be able to provide to people, vocational counseling and guidance is the main thing that we do. That's, the counselors do that. We can do, I'm just going to read these things that they list on here just to give you an idea of what they have in our public information, but I made it disappear from my screen. So let me get back on here. Okay, referrals for hearing, visual, and other exams, assistance with medical appointments and treatment, rehabilitation devices, including hearing aids, wheelchairs, artificial limbs, therapy to address disability, including occupational or speech therapy, physical restoration services, medical, psychological, and vocational assessments, assistance with college education or trade certification, on-the-job training, training in workplace and employer expectations, vocational adjustment training, rehabilitation teacher services to help learn Braille, orientation, and mobility, and health management skills if you are blind or have a visual impairment, and supported employment. We also help people with job matching and job placement, and can provide transportation assistance to people to and from the job. Sometimes that's help paying for a travel voucher. Sometimes it's helping with a vehicle modification. And we refer people to Chris Cole Rehabilitation Center, which is for people with visual impairments. So once a person applies for services and the counselor determines that they're eligible, you work together then to put a written plan into place to decide specifically which services are we able to provide that will address the disability related issues and help you go to work. So that's kind of what makes it different for everybody. It depends on where you want to work and what kind of barriers you're facing due to your disability. Does anybody have any questions so far? That's kind of a nutshell overview. I can talk more in depth about some things if y'all need me to, and I will talk a little bit more in depth about student services specifically because that's what I do.
Is that statewide? Is that statewide? Is that our TWC here in Abilene also?
I missed the very first part of your question. Can you say it again, please?
Is that TWC program statewide? So can we get those same services here in Abilene?
Yes, ma'am. So TWC is statewide. The services are available for anybody who applies. What happens is that most of the service, like as a counselor, I do counseling and guidance. If someone needs applied behavior therapy, I have to pay somebody to do that. And in Victoria, we don't have any therapists who do that. In Abilene, you might. So some of the services that our agency can do are not available in every area. And I actually live in, well, kind of in the country of Victoria, and I'm not familiar with resources y'all have in Abilene. But if you have any specific questions, I can find somebody who works up there and get the answers for you.
Okay. Because I'd like to have that list that you just called out. So we would know in our office what's available for people that come in for our assistance.
Okay, I can email this, just a little cheat sheet that I made. I can email that to Justin, but also if you go to twc.state.tx.us on the website, when you find vocational rehab services, I copied and pasted it straight from there.
Okay, thank you.
Ironically, they don't let us develop our own PowerPoints to give presentations. We used to do that, but about maybe 3 years ago when we became part of TWC doesn't allow that. And so they make them in Austin for us to use. And there's not one that's a general overview. There's some that are specific to visual impairments or specific to working with transition age students, but there is not one that's just general. So since I'm not allowed to make one, that's why I went to the TWC website.
Hi, Liz. I'm Leah Beltran. I'm the Executive Director at Disability in Action. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Leah. Thank you for inviting me. Before you got on, I was saying I like to answer hard questions. I don't so much like to give big presentations. So the thing I asked Justin was, how many people are going to be here? Because I didn't want to be too nervous.
I just have to ask, did you can all of that stuff behind you?
I did.
That's awesome. Nice.
I live out in the country, so sometimes the stores are closed. I got to drive 20 or 30 miles to get something good. So yeah.
That's very cool. Well, thanks
Okay.
again. And I wanted to ask you, your background then is you came from the Department of Assistive and Rehabilitative Services then.
Right. I
Arts.
actually started when we were TRC.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with that, I've been here about 21 years.
Wow.
TRC,
Awesome.
when the agency started, TRC was a standalone agency, and that was maybe in the 60s. And then in somewhere around 15 years ago, we were mandated to become part of Health and Human Services, and that's where we have the acronym DARS.
Okay.
3 years ago, after another audit, we were mandated to move in with Texas Workforce Commission, which is where we are now.
Okay. So you actually work in vocational rehab.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I want to give you an example of some of the things that we've encountered when people come to us.
Okay.
And well, I went over there and told them I wanted to go to school, and they're not going to let me go to school. In other words, they thought they could go in there and you would just write their ticket so that they could go to school. Can you talk a little bit about what that process is like when someone wants to go to college?
Yes, sure. And something that I tell people, especially when they're coming in with something that I suspect I may not help them with, is that our agency provides a lot of services, but once somebody's determined eligible, they're not eligible for every service that we ever do. They're only eligible for, what's related to them. So specifically going to college, before I can say, yes, I can financially support someone in a college program, to be sure and be able to prove that they are academically prepared for college level work. So if somebody reads on a 4th grade level, I can pretty much make a determination that they're not ready for college level work. And the way I explain that, because I work with students all the time, that's what I do. The way I explain that is the things that you were expected to learn in, just say math, for example, in 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade are things that you need to be prepared for college level work, and you don't have those yet. And the way it's different. Every counselor has different ways that they do it, but of course we're using taxpayer money, so we have to document justification for everything that we do. So a lot of times I don't always use school records. I usually like to get new testing if someone's planning to go to college. Sometimes I use school records, but a lot of times I'll get new testing. And a psychological evaluation, I will specifically ask the person I'm paying, do you think that academically prepared for college level training? And they will say yes or no. And it's usually pretty cut and dry. Sometimes it's, with the right accommodations, and if they really are motivated to work hard, maybe. And, when it's maybe, I err on the side of, yeah, let me try to help you. But the maybes really are kind of few and far between. It's typically a lot easier to determine if I have enough documentation to justify spending money on somebody's college education.
And I'm asking this because I don't know. If, let's say I'm a person with a disability, you and I discover that I'm ready. Intellectually, I'm capable. And on a maturity level, I'm capable. What if I need accommodations of some type? If I was a person with a blindness and I needed assistance in the classroom, or are you guys involved in those accommodations once I get to the classroom?
Yes, specifically for visual impairments, there's a lot of preparation that goes into the accommodations, because a lot of times most of the time we make the recommendations for the technology that you need. And a lot of times we can help pay for some or all of that. So for visual impairments, yes, there's a lot. If a person has ADHD and they need extra time for tests and that's all, I typically explain to them how to get it themselves, kind of, some self-advocacy, and they do it. And if they have trouble, then they call me. And I've even many times with our local community college, Victoria College, students have, there's some kind of disconnect between what I'm telling them I think should happen and what really happens when they get there, which happens with my own child in college right now also. And I'll go down there with them and, help them get on the same page. It's not just, hey, let me write you the directions and, send you off on your own. But my intent is to teach them how to do it themselves. But, certainly I handhold sometimes and, whatever it seems to be necessary for whoever I'm working with.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I get that a lot, actually, working with students. One of the school districts that I've worked with, actually in Victoria, for probably the past 9 or 10 years, I've been a transition specific counselor. And I think that school district told, I'm not exactly sure their words, but the way it came to me was, hey, they told me if my kid is in special education, y'all will pay for them to go to college. And so every single person, that's the only people who ever talked to me at first.
Oh, gee.
People, and scholarships and financial aid. And so I do a lot of explaining. We can help people. We look at income before we help people pay for things. And it's not scholarships or financial aid. It's, an eligibility program based on your specific disability. But after, 9 or 10 years, I think I'm on better track with Victoria ISD right now about that. But and statewide, I suspect that, there are probably some school districts that still kind of see us that way. And in the past, our agency in a lot of places functioned that way. I think a lot of offices did in the past just pay for college for anybody and not care whether they were prepared or whether they flunked out or what kind of effect that was going to have on them either. Just kind of, wrote the check. But that, after the audits that we had, is what led to us having to merge with Health and Human Services and now be overseen by TWC. A lot of, just historically things that weren't being done the right way.
Well, I think that and the negative psychological impact of that could be devastating for somebody who's really wanting to be successful. And so I guess on that note, can you talk a little bit more about maybe who's not on the college track, but maybe has never had employment, and is a person with a disability and is interested in simply finding employment? What does that look like when they come through you?
So what it looks like now, for about 3 years, we've had what we call pre-employment transition services. And it allows us opportunities while kids are still in school to provide them with either paid or unpaid internships. And the cool thing is that we can provide job coaches as needed. In the past, years ago, we could only pay for a job coach if somebody was in a job that they were going to keep for, a long time, and we were going to close their case successfully in that job. Well, for students with more severe disabilities, they have not even had a chance to practice or have an after-school job.
Okay.
They needed a job coach. So we're really making an effort to start younger. We're able to work with students as young as 14. In a perfect world, we would have enough transition counselors where every high school in the state would have one assigned, but we're not there. So some high schools have a general counselor who spends 85 or 90% of their time working with adults and just a little bit of time working with the school. So they don't get as much really as the other schools. But these, the feedback I've had from parents is, I would say, unless I've forgotten something, 100% parents are telling me that the work experiences, either paid or unpaid, is the best service that they've received inside or out of the school system as far as preparing their students for work.
That's wonderful. That's great.
So that's really, really a cool thing. And then, like I was saying, not every service is available everywhere. So in Victoria, we had one provider with a contract with us to do the job coaching, and they're not going to renew now. So we're down to 0. And so it gets a little bit more difficult to find the job coaches. We do have some other ways to do it, but by far the best way is to have a provider where we can have it available regularly.
I can just say from the experiences that I've had in working with people who have disabilities and helping them in employment, that job coach is like gold. I mean, they're just so important. And I like to hear the fact that you're working with them at a younger age, instead of waiting until they're about to graduate. I think that pre-graduation time is very important. So that's good to hear.
Yes, that's where we're recognizing that and making that push. Again, I would say that the high schools that have a general counselor who works mostly with adults, they're probably only referring juniors and seniors because that particular counselor just doesn't have more time really to do more than that. So we're definitely not where we want to be, but we're making good strides.
I have one more question for you, and I'll let somebody else dive in. So let's talk a little bit about adults, and let's say you've worked in the same field all your, a majority of your life, and all of a sudden you have a stroke or you're in a severe car accident. Anyway, it's life-changing. Your skills and abilities have changed, done a complete 180. Can you talk a little bit about that situation and what opportunities are there for adults that maybe need to do a change in career?
Yeah, the easiest person to talk about is someone who's had a life-changing event, but their cognitive abilities haven't been affected that much, so that if they just say, okay, I want to go get a job that I can sit all day instead of working in the oil field, that's not nearly as difficult as somebody who, I had this happen actually. A man used to be an accountant. He was probably in his 50s when he came to me, and he'd had a stroke. And he had been substitute teaching, but he got fired from substitute teaching, and he couldn't explain, he had no explanation as to why he got fired from substitute teaching. And so I met with him several times, and I wasn't really sure initially why he got fired from substitute teaching either, until the first time that I actually talked to him for more than 30 or so minutes. And I figured out that he could sit there and, his hair was combed and his shirt was tucked in, and, he looked appropriate, and he could sit there and talk to you. And after about 30 minutes, he would get real frustrated, and he would go like that, and his hair would be sweaty and messed up, and he would untuck his shirt, and sometimes he would tear his buttons off because he just really got frantic after being in one place for a while or talking to one person. So I literally thought, I wasn't really sure what he would do. And of course he knew he'd had a head injury or, some kind of brain damage during the stroke, but he knew that he used to be an accountant, and he knew what kind of job he used to have and how much money he used to make and how much, he knew about money and stuff. So it was real difficult. But finally we got him working somewhere where, and this is one of those things where environment is for some people it's more important than the job you're doing,
Certainly
equally important. But he wasn't needing to necessarily work for food or anything. I mean, it was for his self-esteem and his self-confidence, and he just wanted to work. So I randomly found this place where they build cabinets, and it just so happened that in the cabinet, and they had an assembly line in there and stuff, but everybody who worked there was a male who came kind of from construction, and his quirks didn't bother anybody at all there. Nobody cared if he started screaming out whatever, I can't remember, he had some little thing that he would just kind of randomly say, and they didn't care if his shirt was tucked in or if his hair was crazy. And so he got a job there, and it worked out fine, and he liked it. And that when I specifically remember thinking I was just at a loss for ideas. And the way I came about that is that the owner of that business had had an injury and was in a wheelchair, not permanently, but temporarily. But he started recognizing so many difficulties that it caused him to kind of seek us out and say, hey, I want to hire people with disabilities over here. That was how I ever even heard of the place. It was a kind of a small place. And anyway, yeah, it just kind of worked out that.
That's a great success story. And sometimes that's not difficult, you know, I mean, that can be very difficult when you've got something like that going on, and finding a niche and finding some place where someone could be successful. That's a real success story with him.
It takes a lot of knocking on doors and, you know, getting out there and seeing what's available to find that. But like I said, that really just came to me by accident. It wasn't my hard work that did that. Honestly, I just found it.
That's awesome.
Anybody else have a question?
Do you guys have any specific caseload questions? Maybe that you could bring Liz without a name, and maybe you can ask her.
Liz, I have a question actually.
Okay.
I am an independent living service program specialist, so the ILSP program, and I was just wondering how you have worked with them in the past.
I have not. We don't have one close to where I live. I don't have any specific firsthand knowledge working with the program. I can find some, and I can find an answer to a question for you, but I don't have personal real experience.
Okay.
Sorry, that wasn't.
No. It was just a question kind of to see how other TWCs have worked within that program.
Yeah, a long time ago, and honestly, I couldn't even say 100% for sure if independent living is still with VR. When we were DARS and we went to TWC, some of the programs stayed with Health and Human Services and some came with VR. When we were all together, Victoria is about, what, Justin, 2 hours away from San Antonio, maybe? So our independent living specialist counselor who was assigned to our area worked in San Antonio. And I do know that over the years, maybe I took a courtesy application for her or something, but our funds have always been separate. So I haven't worked with that at all. And I'm not even, and like I said, I'm not even sure if they're still with us or if they're still with Health and Human Services.
So they are with Health and Human Services.
Oh, okay.
So actually, when you became a part of TWC, the independent living side obviously went into the Centers for Independent Living. Okay. And so that's where that side went. But sometimes there may be special circumstances that a person that is working with TWC, sometimes HHSC is like, well, maybe this isn't a special case that both programs work together.
I would say that could happen if, a person would, as long as they're at a point where they have an employment goal in mind, then, that would be the point where they come to us. In the past, when we were all together, you couldn't do both programs at the same time, but now that we're separate, maybe you can, because we work with a lot of, oh no, still not?
No, sorry.
I want to remind everyone that this is going to be recorded and is going to be used as an instructional video for consumers. So we need to keep our questions about what your consumers may want to know about TWC and what they do. Okay? So Shop Talk is another meeting. Okay?
So I was just trying to see how they work together. So thank you.
Thanks.
So how long, okay, so maybe you assist somebody with getting employment and they're doing good, you know, for the first 3 months and then 6 months, okay. Do y'all keep up with them after that, after they, I guess, reach their goal?
What we do, once they've been employed for at least 90 days without any supports from us, we can close the case successfully. So I wouldn't say it's always closed right on that day, but you know, that's when we start looking at cases for closure. If a case is closed successfully and a person calls 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 months later and says, hey, all of a sudden I'm having some problems, we can open that case back up and provide supports. But no, we don't typically provide follow-up after a case is closed. Although now that we've become part of TWC does have some reporting standards for for 4 quarters after a case is closed. So we are making changes to where we may continue to get data some kind of way after a case is closed. But as counsel, we're not actively involved once a case is closed, unless they call us and ask for help for something.
And there's not a limit. So say I went through the program 10 years ago and y'all helped me to where I'm at, but now my job is wanting to move me up and said, well, if I get a degree and whatever, there's not,
Right.
so there's not a limit. So you'll keep helping me as long as I'm income eligible. You help.
You can.
Keep.
There's no limit on the number of cases a person can have, and you have to reapply every time, and your eligibility will be redetermined every time. But yes, there's no limit to how many times you can apply or have an active case.
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
if
Well, I just
this
don't want
happens, I'm sorry.
I just don't want one of my consumers to come say, oh, well, I went through them 5 years ago and it was just a one-time thing. I can't go back. I wanted to make sure with you.
Yes.
Okay.
They can come back. And occasionally, when cases have been closed unsuccessfully and they're reapplying, asking for the same thing, and we know that that one thing based on experience we're not going to be able to do, they might not be determined eligible. But if it's a new situation, a new disability, a new job, a new anything, yes, they should reapply and let their eligibility be assessed at that time.
Right, because your primary goal is to have successful cases turned in through your fiscal year and not have them lingering, correct?
Right. Well, yes. So for me as a transition counselor, I can work with students as young as 14, and I do start with students that young. So I have a lot of lingering people for many years. But yes, with adults, typically, unless they're, you know, in a college training program, which we know is going to last 1 to 4 years, we're trying to make progress towards employment.
Okay.
Not that it always works out that way, but
okay. I understand that.
Liz, do you in your agency, do you have the ability to assist someone who is having trouble simply getting the right keywords, getting a good resume into the system where they can get some really good hits for employment? Is there a way our folks can get some help with that? It's been kind of a challenge in the past.
we do have, of course, yes, if they have a disability and they're eligible for our services and they just need help with a resume, that, I mean, that's kind of on the easier end of things that we can do, but counselors can help people with their resumes. We can also pay providers, if there's one in the area, to develop resumes, which I typically do because I feel like they do a better job than I do. So yes, and that would be something for us if we helped someone develop a better resume, practice interviews, just kind of prepare for going on that, finding the job and going on that interview. That's a service that we provide.
Well, I was thinking more about your system and then being able to have, putting their information into your system so that they can get a lot of good job hits that are appropriate for them, because there's many nuances in your.
You're talking about work in Texas, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't work in Texas.
Okay.
The contract, the board program, that's not the program that we use in VR. I'm familiar with it, but I don't have access to it as an employer and be able to help them make hits or anything. No, what we do is we partner with our local board here in Victoria and ask them to help the people who need help doing that. And sometimes it's successful and sometimes not so much.
So just to clarify, and I don't mean to back you into a corner, but
it's okay.
One of the things that we've run into is that our folks with disabilities, or even, I've worked in that system a little bit. Number one, do you know, are you aware they used to do, if you're newly unemployed, you're newly looking for work, they had like orientation classes about how to use their system. But let's say you're someone who is quite capable of working, but you've got some type of disability that keeps you from being able to navigate work in Texas appropriately. Now, I'll just tell you what we've heard in the past is that you guys at TWC are not allowed to help with that. Is that true? And if someone needed help navigating that system and making sure, that if they want to be a waiter, that they're not getting hits, working in landscaping,
right?
How can they? So who would you go to at your local workforce to get assistance with that, and can they provide it?
Okay, so there's probably lots of answers to that question. Some boards have a disability navigator. Ours in Victoria does not. So they used to, so I know how the disability navigator works, but ours doesn't. And if y'all's has one, the best thing to do is to contact that disability navigator who's supposed to do exactly what you're saying that you have issues with. Coming from VR, before we were part of TWC, we had that same problem. And now that VR is part of TWC, we still see the same problem with our customers who we work with, who are all people with disabilities. So since we don't have a disability navigator, we have somebody in our office who just took on the job of being the main contact with, like, we're not co-located either. At some point, every VR office is going to be co-located with the Workforce Solutions office where the board is, but we're not there yet. So in Victoria, we have somebody who just took on that job in our office to be the main go-to. If I say, hey, my student went down there, and because if somebody just needs help writing a better resume, they really should be able to go to that local workforce office, not VR, just the local workforce office. But as you said, really work. So in our office, if one of my students says to me, hey, I try to go down there and nobody would help me, I ask my contact, who's my coworker, Selena, and she finds somebody down there who will say, tell them to call me at this certain number. So if you don't have a navigator and you don't have a good contact person at that local Workforce Solutions office, one of the jobs a VR counselor can do is help somebody maneuver that system. We can try to help. I mean, we can't go down there and say, hey, you do this, what I said right now or anything, but we certainly can help the customer talk to somebody down there and
Okay.
hey, they really need and somebody to work with them individually. And I would say this, I don't think this is the way it's supposed to work, but it does sometimes. The VR counselor, if they're able to, they can help somebody try to maneuver that work in Texas website. The counselors in Victoria do it all the time.
Okay.
It's not easy for anybody to maneuver, I don't think, because
Yeah.
I have to look in there also. So, there's a couple of different ways, but truthfully, what I think right now is that the system isn't really working for what it's supposed to do. So that's kind of where VR, now that we've become part of TWC, we're really working to try to help them recognize exactly what you're talking about, that's really a barrier for people with disabilities. And we've got to find some kind of way to fix that. And we're working on that, and it's not fixed yet.
So glad to hear you say that. And, I just have to give a plug. You do have a Center for Independent Living there in your area.
Oh, where is it?
They're called Vale. Can you, Justin, can you tell her where Vale is?
It's in San Antonio, isn't it?
No, there is a big one in San Antonio.
Vale is near Corpus, correct? I think. Just a second.
Isn't there one near you though? I thought it was Vale.
I think our closest center is a few hours away.
Yeah,
we're a pretty underserved area.
Okay.
Uh,
Can you, while we're talking, Justin, will you look up Vale and find out where they are and see what counties they cover? I think you can go to the ILRU website and do that. But I'm so thrilled, Liz, to hear you say you're advocating for folks. And I think that's what it would take is you as part of the workforce system is being on the inside and advocating for these people, because there is a genuine need and a genuine desire by a lot of folks that, they want to work.
Yes.
It's just finding out how to get that thread through the needle, and so what we might do is encourage our folks, our staff here to work again to find out who's in our workforce that could be our point person. And I kind of have a dream, because I've heard of other centers in other states doing it, is that the Center for Independent Living would have a day, or maybe what would be great is if I had a person I could have down at Workforce all week as my employee. Workforce wouldn't pay for it. That would help folks with disabilities get what they need in that regard. And so that's a goal. That's a goal for our center. But wonderful to know that you're an advocate there. So if somebody came, let's say they came to you, but they didn't have an open case with you, would you be willing to make a few phone calls for that person, even if they weren't on your caseload?
Sure.
Okay.
I will find the right person for them.
Okay, awesome.
Things I've noticed is that some of the VR offices have merged with their Workforce Solutions office.
Ours has.
And once they're together, I feel like there's a lot more opportunity to expand their understanding of VR services, like how we are right now. It's just the way it's always been. Our office is in a different place. And even before everybody started working at home, we only call them when we need something, when our customer comes and says, hey, I couldn't, get help with this, that, or the other. And, and then we call over there kind of trying to figure out the right person. So I'm hopeful that when we get all office together, which I think Victoria's due for 2021, that that'll be better because we'll see them every day and we can talk to them.
Sure.
And see the people coming in and out of the door and
definitely
that we provide. So I'm hopeful that we're gonna make some strides here in Victoria soon.
That'd be great for you guys. Did you find out anything, Justin?
Yes, ma'am. Vale has 2 offices, one in Rio Grande Valley and one in Laredo. Those are right on the border, like far South Texas. The counties that they serve are Hidalgo, Starr, Willoughby, Cameron, Webb, Jim Hogg, Duval, and Zapata.
So that's the closest center to you, Justin?
Actually, it is not. Victoria is pretty much right in the center of three different independent living centers. Um, Sales in San Antonio is about
Okay.
100 miles away. CB Sill is in Corpus, which is also about 100 miles. And there are five centers in the Houston area. Those are the
Okay.
7 closest to our area.
Well, I would encourage anybody watching this video, and also to you, Liz, if you're familiar with sales, then you know what we do, right, as Centers for Independent Living. Okay. Well, I would encourage anybody, don't hesitate, even if you look up a center and they're not, your county is not listed. We are adamant about helping people and doing as much as we can. So we're not going to turn anybody away if they're not in our county area. In fact, Disability in Action has a satellite office for the Independent Living Services program in Wichita Falls. Desperately, we need a Center for Independent Living in that area. But Leanne, who is our case manager there, she does a lot of work outside of her program to help people find what they need. So, I just want to put that out there. Reach out, find your closest, and I can promise you that my cohorts in other counties are more than willing to help people.
We just have to ask.
Yeah.
I would like to add to that. So I have an online program, which is where this is being streamed right now. I can also, if you have questions, I can refer you to the correct person also for the whole state of Texas.
For anybody who's watching this recording, please reach out to Justin. That's what we're here for. This program is a grassroots effort to bring folks together that need to know more about living independently and doing all the things that they want to do. And so there's resources out there. Justin can be your touchstone and get you headed in the right direction where you don't have to make a million phone calls. We can help with that. So just want to throw that out there too.
So Liz, I have a question.
Okay.
If someone is wanting to look into receiving your services and what are some of their requirements and documentations they would need to become eligible?
Okay, so to become eligible, we have to verify that they have a disability. So if they have an amputation, we can usually visually verify that. We don't need a doctor's records for that. We also have to verify that their disability is causing an impediment to employment. So if a person with an amputation is a waiter, then yes, that's causing a problem. If they are an accountant and work from home, that may not be an impediment to employment. So that's where the counselor will rely on the medical information as far as the diagnosis, but determining the impediment to employment depends on what the person does in their job. And that's where the counselor will make that vocational decision about their eligibility. So aside from that, they have to be able to legally work in the United States. So they have to be able to provide employment verification documents. And there has to be a service that we actually can provide that will help them. If someone needed a service, there's a couple of things that we can never provide. For example, we can't buy someone a house. So if someone said, hey, I just need a house and then I could become employed, that's not something we can provide. So we probably wouldn't be able to make them eligible, but there's just a couple of things that are like a house and a car. Most of it is the person and the counselor discussing how the problem the disability is causing as far as employment, and figuring out what kind of solution there is and can we help them get that solution.
Does it matter on their household income?
For eligibility, it does not, because when a person's eligible for our services, what they're eligible for is vocational counseling. So trained counselors work with them and provide counseling on how to work and understand your disability and how those two go together. If you need help paying for like college, for example, yes, we look at household. Every individual's household income is looked at for those services. The only things that we don't have to look at income for are the pre-employment transition services for students and employment direct services. So if we pay for job placement or we pay for a job coach for someone on a job, we don't look at income for those services either. But anything other than being a student or direct job related services, yes, we look at it.
Awesome, thank you.
Liz, you spoke about hearing and vision assistance through TWC.
Yes,
Do
ma'am.
they do medical?
Yes, there's not a whole lot of disabilities that are not included in our definition. You don't have to be determined to have a disability by Social Security. It's really related on what your diagnosis is and if it's causing you a problem going to work. So yes, we have people who are eligible because they have diabetes or because they had a complex fracture that wouldn't heal and they still can't use their arm and they may need some physical therapy or another surgery or things like that. There are times that we are able to do those things. And in some places, like in Victoria, there are not a lot of resources for people who don't have medical insurance. So in Victoria, there's quite a lot of adults with medical needs who apply for services. In some big cities where there's some kind of comparable benefit available for people who don't have insurance, those people never, apply for VR services. So it's real different in every region.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I don't have any more questions.
Well, if nobody has any other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for being at this meeting and attending, taking time out of your workday. And thank you for all the information, Liz.
You're welcome. And Justin, if you could share my email with everybody, if y'all have any VR questions and you don't know somebody at your local office, you're welcome to email me and I'll try to figure it out or find somebody who can help you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can do that. And one final thing to anybody watching on Facebook, I'm going to post a link to a survey for our virtual independent living services. If you were satisfied with this meeting, please fill that survey out. It helps keep this program going for years to come. And thank you, everybody. I believe that is all we have.
Thank you.
Nice meeting y'all. Bye.
You too.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you, Justin.
Yes, ma'am.